And we are live. All right. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Chase from GirlsChase, who is one of the original OGs of the Help I Can't Get Girls movement industry. And I'm pretty impressed that I managed to get him on. Maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit better than that. Like how long you've been at this for. Just tell us what you do for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, sure. So I first got into this space through the seduction pickup movement where, there was like a generation or two before I got involved in that. So there's some more OGs than me. But for me, I was at a point in my life personally where I didn't know what to do with women. And so I just told myself, well, the only way I'm going to figure it out is if I just start talking to women because I didn't have any women in my life. I've got to approach this like a skill building kind of thing, which I'd done with other things in my life. And I was like, I don't see why it shouldn't work here. So I said, I've just got to treat it as a skill. I'm just going to go talk to girls until I figure out how to talk to girls well and start getting dates and everything. And I started doing that for like a year. And then I found this group of guys online that were also doing that. And my mind was blown away. And I was like, there are other guys that are doing this too. I'm not the only one. So I got involved in that and I started having all these wonderful experiences with women and meeting a bunch of guys. And some of them were kind of weird, but some of them were really cool. And there are a lot of guys that were far ahead of where I was. I was able to learn from those guys. And I was really active on this forum that was the big forum online at the time called Fast Seduction. And people were liking the stuff that I was posting. I tried to be helpful and give a lot of good feedback to guys, based on whatever level I was at. And I ended up being rated as one of the top posters on there. And I had more and more guys that were coming to me and they were saying, Chase, you should start a blog. I would love to read your blog. And I am not a blog guy. I never read blogs. And I was like, who reads blogs? Why would anybody want to read my writing on a blog? And they kept pestering me about this for over a year. And finally I was like, okay, I'll start a blog. I don't think anything's going to come of it. And I started blogging and then, and I was working a 9 to 5 at the time. I was working for one of the Fortune 50 companies doing some consulting. And I ended up getting laid off and started traveling around. And then I was like, I want to go into entrepreneurship. I should start some different businesses. And I was like, let's just see what we can do with this dating blog that I have. So I had a buddy whose blog was blowing up and he'd been writing a blog post every day. And he's like, I'm up to 40,000 visits a month. And I don't think maybe you can't get that in the dating space, but you can probably get something. I was like, all right, I'll try consistency and see what happens. And like a year later, we're up to 300,000 visits a month. And then we got up to 700,000 visits a month and then over 1 million visits a month at one point. It's come down a bit, but at this point, over the past 16 years, we've had 64 million people visit GirlsChase.com, got over 14,000 customers. We've made an impact and a lot of stuff that we've introduced is some of it is kind of filtered out into the mainstream. Although as the guy that's like trying to push stuff in that I think is going to help guys, you get kind of distressed because you see like, okay, people are picking up on this one thing, but they're missing out on some other important stuff. You never get as much out into the mainstream as you want to get out there. But it's been a cool ride. We've gotten to change a lot of guys' lives. You can see the impact it's having because people come up and I get a lot of guys coming up and saying, you're never going to know how much of an impact you had on my life. You got guys that are like, I probably still wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for your stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. We got guys that have girlfriends, guys that are married now, multiple guys that have named their sons Chase because they say if it wasn't for me, they would have met the child's mother. So I've had at least 3 guys tell me that, and they say that for every good piece of positive feedback, there's like 20 more that you don't get. So maybe there's like 60 kids named Chase out there. I don't know. It's kind of cool, kind of weird, but that's where we're at. So, and you and I just met over X, where we just started getting active recently because, I had some people telling me like X is pretty good. It's like the high IQ place and we're never able to crack it before, but I found this like guide, just like, here's how you grow on X. I'm the skill builder type of guy. So I was like, all right, let's try that out and see if we can grow on there. So now that's our latest venture, trying to branch out onto
the next thing people are going to pester you on is to have you on YouTube. Like, why is your face not on YouTube, man?
Yeah. Another challenge.
One of the interesting things you mentioned that you realized it was a skill issue. And I remember when I was, probably way back around the time you started writing, when I was having problems with girls and I didn't realize it was a skill issue. Like, I just thought like, this is how it is. And I like read some book, what was it? The game was, I think it was the game. I was like, oh my God, this can change. If you just have the information to even know that this is a skill, like it just opens up a new world. Do you come across a lot of guys that like don't even realize it's something they can work on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think most people, most things in life don't realize life is like it's a mindset shift where you can realize that pretty much anything is a skill, and that if you practice it enough and you're smart about your practice, you can get better at it. But this in particular, social skills, there are a lot of people that seem to think that say, you have it or you don't. Either
Yep.
or whatever you're getting socially, it's because it's based on immutable characteristics. It's because
Yep.
you're, especially now with all the, there's the looks, money, status guys. It's based on your looks,
It's your
money,
jawline.
status.
Without the
Yeah,
jawline,
you don't have the jawline, no woman's going to want to talk to you. So get your jawline implants. But once you start making the shift that this is a skill and there are all these different things that factor into it, you start seeing the world in a very different way than the guy who's just kind of helpless, like, well, there's nothing I can do. I just get whatever I can get.
yeah. And I think there's one of the discussions we had on X where, we talked about what is it that is under your control? And like, yeah, maybe you can't change your jawline, although you could hit the gym. That would at least lose some body fat. There's someone under your control. You can't change your height, really. But like, given the experience you have, like, what percentage of that really? Like, how much can you change? Like, what is under your control?
We can't change your raw genetics and the stuff that comes from that. Like you said, you can't change your jawline realistically. I mean, you can put on muscle and get like a firmer jawline. If you're overweight, you can lose weight, and that gives you a much better looking jawline than when you're fatter. I think a lot of people don't realize how big of an impact the fat that you carry around on you has on your jawline.
Yep.
Like I can even look at during the coronavirus lockdowns, I put on a bunch of extra weight and got fatter. And then one day I was looking at, and we have a video site, not very much traffic yet. I was making videos for that, and I was looking at myself, and I was like, Jesus, I ballooned up. Like, look at my face is like a circle. And so you slim down, it looks a lot better. But there's so much that you can change, and you can see it with girls very easily, because you can look at the before and after makeup pictures for a girl, and you can see that she looks like a totally different person after she does her makeup and her hair. But there are other things that go into that, like the clothes that she's wearing. She's showing off skin, showing off cleavage. And then on top of that, that's just the appearance, but there's also the way that she behaves. But she behaves in a very sexy way. She behaves in a confident way. She could be a lot more alluring than even the girl who is naturally beautiful, but she's not doing any of that stuff. Maybe she's dressed a little frumpy. She's off in the corner. She's kind of sticking to herself. Nobody notices her, even though she has a much more beautiful face. And it works the same way for guys. There's all this stuff that you can change, and guys will get fixated usually on one thing that they can't change. Like, well, my nose isn't right, or I don't have the right jawline, or I'm a few inches too short, or whatever it is. But there's all the stuff that you can change, and that's where you need to be focused. It's like the old, the serenity prayer.
Yep.
Like you remember the God grant me the wisdom or God grant me the whatever, to accept what I can, to change what I can change, to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. But that's how it is. If you're focused on stuff you can't change, then you won't change anything. But if you're like, well, I can't change that stuff, let's change all the other stuff around that stuff that I can change and see what happens. That's when you start seeing differences. You're like, wow, I made that change, and it actually changed the way that. And I'll give one more anecdote. I don't want to ramble too much, but
Please.
the thing that sparked this realization for me was I was in sixth grade actually. And at the time, I was like the smart kid who's always raising his hand, and I had these big googly glasses, and I kind of had built up this reputation as the school nerd. I was always reading books, and other boys are playing football, and I'm out on the schoolyard reading these books. And I had this like kind of nerdy coat that I would wear, and one of my uncles had bought me this like the local sports team's coat, which is really popular. And I was like, sports, no, I could never wear that. He's humiliated. And, but one day I forget why this idea popped into my head where I was like, I wonder what would happen if I went to school in the sports coat and I took off my glasses. So I decided to try it. And I was like, I'd take off my glasses. My mother didn't want me to take them off, so I had to sneak them off after I got on the bus. And I had on the like football jacket. I got to school and suddenly everyone was like, "Oh, wow, Chase, you got the football jacket on." And I had this crowd of people around me and they're treating me like I'm cool all of a sudden. And I was like, "What the heck is going on?" Like I'm still me. The only thing I changed was my coat and I took my glasses off. And all these kids were just gathered around, giving me all this attention. Suddenly, over the next few days, I kept doing it, and the kids were treating me like I was suddenly much cooler and more interesting. And then I was like, okay, we'll try the reverse experiment. I'm going to put my old coat back on, put my glasses back on. And I did that. And I fully expected to go back to like, I'm the nerd again, but it didn't happen. Now people would see me in this different light and they kept treating me like I was this new and more interesting guy. And I was like, huh, I wonder what other things I could change about the way I present myself. And that'll change the way people treat me. And so I just did all these experiments in junior high and high school where I found that you can change the way that you look, you change the way that you behave, and it will change the way that people will react towards you and treat you.
So you were officially performing social experiments on children.
Yeah. Don't tell the American Psychological Association.
Don't tell anyone. And what's interesting about your experience is that it's such a simple, superficial change that led to such like a dramatic difference. It wasn't like you're like, I'm going to spend like years developing my jawline to go to the gym. It was like, okay, I'm going to change my clothing. And even that has an effect.
No mewing.
Like not even, yeah. You mentioned earlier that, you write a lot of stuff for guys, but the things that guys like focus on isn't like quite always what you want them to think about. Or they like only know one thing. Like, what is it that you would want people to think about more than they do?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, part of it is understanding the way that women think about guys.
Damn it,
there's a lot of like folk wisdom out there about how girls think about guys that is boiled down. Whoops. Oh, it just told me video upload stalled. Okay. There's there's a lot of folk wisdom. And one of the things I've noticed is that when you try and boil wisdom down into these little snippets, it's very prone to being misconstrued because people will pass it through their own filters and take it different ways. So you see stuff like, I just had an X post about this the other day, but you'll see stuff like, guys will be posting stuff like, she's not yours, it's just your turn. And there's some accuracy in that. The way that I tell guys to think about girls usually is like, that I got from a guy named Zan. His thing was like, a girl, you think of a girl as a butterfly. She comes by, she lands on your hand. If you try and grab her, you crush her, but you just let her sit on your hand for a while and just enjoy her while she's there. She might stay there for, 4 minutes, or she might stay there for 40 years. That's really the kind of, if you're thinking about women as, they're their own people, they're not like a piece of property that you grab, but particularly once you're good at being attractive and creating a kind of relationship that she wants to be a part of, she's going to stick around for potentially a really long time. And so if you think about it that way, it's correct. But the way that a lot of guys interpret it, you can tell when they hear this, she's not yours, just your turn. It's kind of like, okay, it's going to be my turn. She's the prize. I've got this girl. She's valuable, but then at some point she's going to leave and there's nothing I can do about it. And you're in this totally passive role where you're like hoping to get the girl, and like, that's not how you should be thinking about it at all. You need to be thinking about yourself as like, I am this valuable guy. I'm gonna, I've done the work. I've made myself attractive to women. I know that women like me, and, lucky her, if she gets to be a part of my life for a while. She's probably gonna want to stick around when she is. But there's all this stuff like that. It's, partly the way that you're thinking about yourself, partly the way that you're thinking about women. And, a lot of it is experience-based. It's hard to believe stuff like that when you haven't had experiences to back it up.
Yeah.
So I guess a big thing that I would also focus on recommending with guys is focusing on getting good, positive experiences, because I'll see a lot of guys that they have a lot of complaints and negativity and misery, but they're not getting positive experiences to go against that, to counteract that. They're like, well, I've had these experiences. They were bad. That's just how it is. I'm just going to accept it. It's like, well, if you've had bad experiences, you want to counteract those with good experiences so that you could start rebuilding your way of thinking about the world and rebuilding your hope, I guess, for what you could achieve, because you're like, okay, now I've had some good experiences. I know what I can achieve. But probably go into a lot more things, but that's just some stuff that if I'm going to change it, I'll change that. Skill building mentality is another one.
Yeah. She's not yours. It's not your, it's just your turn. It's like such a common one. And I think that one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is that the stuff that's like most aggressive and offensive and catchy is what gets attention.
Uh-huh.
And like, it has a fundamentally negative vibe. It's like, she's a hoe. That's what it says. Like, she's a hoe.
Yeah.
She'll never stay with you. And I guess for some women, like, yes, there are some women who don't know how to be attached and she will never stay with you. But then
Sure.
there are others who like do know how to build relationships and do want relationships. And so if you have this like negative mindset, you're like, they're all like this, like, it's going to be hard to be happy if you're always like looking for when she's going to leave you too. Like that doesn't build like a good connection with anyone.
Yeah, there's a lot of confirmation bias I've noticed. Like guys will talk about the divorce rate. They're like, the divorce rate is like over 50%, 60%, the odds that she's going to leave you. The divorce rate for a first marriage is somewhere in the 30%. It's like 1 out of 3. 2 out of 3 first marriages never divorce. The divorce rate gets pushed up because the people that divorce from their first marriage go on to divorce from their second and third marriages. So there's a much higher divorce rate because these serial divorcees keep divorcing over and over again. And they push up the overall rate. But the majority of people are not getting divorced. Another one is they talk about the, women are sleeping around and having all this sex. There are tons of studies on how women are having much less sex now than they were just a generation ago. And when you look at partner counts, when they do the average partner count, when they look at mean, it comes back as like 12 partners lifetime for the average American, men and women the same. But then, so you're like, wow, maybe that's a lot compared to the average person, because most people feel like, they're like, I'm not at 12 partners. The average is much higher. So everyone else has had more sex than I am. But when you cut it down to the median, and you look right at the median, if you go to like at the person right in the middle, the average partner count lifetime is 3. You're like, well, okay, that's what the average is. There's 42% of women that have 2 partners or fewer their entire lives. They'll never more than 2.
Yep.
And guys don't realize this. It's like outside their, and there's all these things that are happening that create these illusions. Like all the women that you see online are the women that are attention focused. They are putting themselves out there a lot more. Those are the same kinds of women generally who are sleeping with more guys. So you're a lot more exposed to these women. The kind of woman who's sleeping with 2 guys is not parading herself around on the internet. She's a silent majority. She's off in the corner. You don't see her. You're not paying attention to her. Just like she's the girl, she's dressed up frumpy. She's not all flashy looking. So you don't even notice
She's
her
not a
out
fresh
in
and
public.
fit.
Yeah. She might have a genetically more beautiful face and body, but you don't notice her because she's not no cleavage. So there's all these women that guys aren't even paying attention to, and they're focused on the really flashy women, and they're getting really angry about those girls, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you want to pay attention to the flashy women, then try and enjoy those women, but they're not the majority.
Yeah, I think like the Fresh and Fit style podcast, like have like that plus Instagram plus everything, like really skews people's perception of like what is actually the common person. And like you mentioned the average and the mean, and I want to just like unpack that for people just in terms of the terms. Like what it means is that like the average might be 12, but the actual common person is like sleeping, has like a partner count of 3, but there's a few that are just like extreme outliers that push up the average. Like, is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. When we look at it, 2% of women have 100 partners or more, but you can't go to like negative 100 partners to balance that out. There's no woman she's like negative 50. So there's like 0 is the bottom line. And you got these outliers with many more partners. They just drag up the entire average for all the other women. So when you look at average, if you're looking at the mean, it gets pulled out. There's a disconnect from what the common woman is doing because of those outlier women with like super high sex drive who just love sex and just having it with as many guys as possible.
And are the most like visible and vocal about it, and going on shows and talking to everyone and and seeking attention and yeah, like most of the normal women I know, like you can't find them. They're not on Instagram, or if they are, it's like their dog and like a cupcake and that's it. And but us guys, like I think until you have some as you mentioned experience, like we don't realize it. We like look at the girls that are good at like the presentation. Like I remember when I was younger, there was a guy I was friends with, and he just like was so attracted to like the obvious superficial stuff. And I was like, oh, you just like cleavage and boobs, but this girl is like no better looking than that one. But he couldn't quite tell. Like, is that common?
Yeah, it's very common. There's a reason that women do all that makeup and the hair and show the skin is because it works, because it triggers. And if you look at there's plenty of scientific studies on it, like women with red cheeks, their face gets a little bit redder when they're ovulating. They tend to show more skin. They arc their backs more, which is what high heels do. High heels add an arc to the woman's back that is present when, no matter what stage of her menstrual cycle she's at. So women do all these things that simulate fertility, that are showing to men, I'm fertile, I'm available to be impregnated, and it gets guys to give them attention. And so women that want attention for whatever reason, maybe she was neglected as a child, or she went through some abuse as a child and she wanted abuse. Maybe she's just somebody that just likes attention for whatever reason. So they'll do more of this stuff to get more attention on them, and it works. And guys will see, wow, the part of the brain is triggered that says, oh, there's a fertile woman. Look, she's advertising herself as very fertile. She's showing skin. She's got red cheeks. She's got the hair all done. She's, maybe she's wearing red, which is another one. It's like a 17% arousal boost if she's wearing the color red. So guys will focus on those girls and they'll ignore all the other girls that aren't exhibiting those signs. And what I recommend for guys that want to be able to not be captivated by all that is to train yourself to be able to look past that. It's really helpful for if you're chatting up girls just in general too, because you're not being wowed by all the superficial stuff around the outside. If you learn to, when you first look at her, you're going to check out her body real quick, see what she looks like, because you're walking up to a girl as a whale or anything, but you're going to give her a quick look. But after that, you're not allowed to look at her anymore. You just got to look at her face. And when you're just looking at her face, you're not paying attention to her hair, you're not paying attention to her cleavage or her butt or her legs or anything. It's a lot easier to just treat her as a human instead of getting all excited and drooling all over her. And then the other thing on top of that,
one of the things that was hard for me.
Makeup.
Yeah. That one I had an easy time with, but it was hard when you're like young and messed up or just like confused or horny to treat women as people. Like we think of them as these like otherworldly creatures because they have so much power over us. Like, how do you get better at that? How do you get better at treating them like people? Besides, or maybe is experience like the only way to do it?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent it's experience. One of the things we talk a lot about in our space is scarcity versus abundance. And it's like anything, like the rich guy is a lot more comfortable with money because he's got a lot of it. The guy that's got a lot of women or has no problem getting new women can be really chill around women because he's not worried about like, oh no, what if I never see this girl again? He's not worried. He's got more girls coming. The guy that doesn't have that, every new girl who's even somewhat attractive or gives him attention, he's like, oh my God, I can't lose this girl. I've got to like lock her down and make sure that, maybe I'll never get another chance again. And so to a certain extent, the guy that's not there yet, he's doing some fake it till you make it. You've got to be thinking about like, okay, how would I behave if I had plenty of options with women and I wasn't worried about losing this girl? Okay, I would behave more chill. I wouldn't be clingy. I wouldn't be needy. I wouldn't be chasing after her. I would, be talking to her about this or that. I wouldn't be like drooling all over her, giving her compliment after compliment. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so cute. Oh, your eyes, I'm getting sucked into your eyes, whatever. So you have to be thinking that way, trying to emulate that. And over time, as the guy deals with the woman trying to be more like the cool guy, he's going to get better and better reactions from women. She doesn't know what's in her head. She can't read your mind. She's going based off of what you can tell from you. If you're doing your best to act like a cool guy, she's going to be a lot more likely to interpret you as, okay, he's probably a cool guy, as opposed to the guys that are being all needy and weird around her. And so as women treat you that way, then they start to like you more. They're like, he's actually cool. And then you get further along with them. And you start to get more and more women that are actually in your life. You're getting farther and farther along with them and get more options. And eventually you reach a point where you know that you can go out and get women fairly reliably. You've got female options in your life and you start to really chill out with women in general. And you're not stressed out about, I've got to not lose this girl. And you can actually just sit and talk with a girl and have fun with her and engage in a flirtation or have a nice conversation with her, bond with her, get to know her. And the whole thing is just cool.
And then it works much better at that point Um, so for some guys, it's way harder to fake that I don't care behavior because they care like way too much, and it's hard for them to suppress it. Um, what do those guys do? What should they do?
Well, the best you can do is try your best. And, the thing with this stuff in general is that anytime you're learning something new, you want to be focused on trying to have some positive experiences and ultimately get some lucky breaks. Because no matter how nervous you are or how much you're screwing up on this or that, there are always going to be at least a few girls that, for whatever reason, are just really drawn to you for you. Whether it's an immune systems. There's some studies showing that women will go for men with different immune MHC genes.
Different, but not too different.
Yeah. They can be just stuff about scent, something about your face. One of the things we've seen is facial similarities. If you look at celebrity couples, you'll notice that a lot of them have extremely similar faces. And when they do studies on it, they find that 40% of people have a very strong preference for mates that have similar faces to their own. Another 20% have a very strong preference for mates with totally different faces from their own. And then the other 40% are somewhere in the middle. They don't care that much. Maybe a little bit of a factor. Depends on the relationship with the family members growing up. If you had a good relationship with your family, you want people that look like you, that look like them. If you had a bad relationship, people that don't look like them, don't look like you. But, if you've got a girl that looks a lot like you, she's generally going to tend to be more attracted to you more often than not. Because the two of you have similar faces. If she had a good relationship with her family growing up, she's going to be like, oh, he's just like one of those people that I like. And then you get an easy break there. So the main thing for guys that are having any kind of struggle is just making sure that you're out there enough, that you're talking to women enough. If, over time, women aren't terrible. You can have normal conversations with them. You don't have to be like trying to make every single girl you talk to your wife. You just go up and talk to them. And as you do, you'll have more and more positive experiences. You discover like, okay, it's fine to talk to women. Plenty of them are normal human beings. They're not like trying to shut me down. Like, oh, you can't talk to me. You're not hot enough to talk to me yet. It doesn't really happen unless you're going to like high end nightclubs where she's really guarded because there are all these guys hitting on her. If you just talk to women in normal places, a lot of times you can just have normal conversations. And over time, it becomes normalized for you. You familiarize yourself with women, and instead of them being these scary creatures, they're just normal, regular women, just other people just like you.
What do you think of passport broing? Let's say you really feel like you're playing life on hard mode. Like, what do you think of going to like Southeast Asia and being like, all right, let me like take their tutorial level and see what happens there?
Yeah, it can work. And I think there's a lot of advantage to travel in general. You get a foreigner bonus typically wherever you go, and every guy. So we've had guys from over 100 different countries who are customers of ours, and I've talked to lots of guys from every country, and like pretty much every guy from every country is like, oh, the women in my country are so terrible. The women from every other country are better. Because what happens is the girls from your country hold you to a higher standard than they do to guys that are not from your country. Because she's already dated a bunch of guys who are your same nationality. And she's like, okay, guys from my nationality know what the drill is. They know that there's a certain standard of behavior. There's a certain way that we do this dating thing. I have certain expectations for them. And it's harder to break out of that because you really have to be able to break the mold and come in as a guy because you're very different, even though you're from her same culture. Whereas if you're a guy from a different culture, she's like, oh, this guy's a little bit pushy or he's doing things. That's not how guys from my culture would do it. But maybe that's probably just how it is from his culture. He probably just doesn't know. So you get cut a lot more slack. There's a lot more leeway. A lot of times if you're traveling, it's like, oh, he's a guy from XYZ country. I've never tried a guy from that country before. Let's see what happens. So it's definitely an advantage. The downside of it is that you get guys that just have zero game at all and they try going to another country, a lot of times they still are not able to do anything because they don't have the basic habits of like, okay, I've got to go talk to a girl or I've got to, take her through the steps of the courtship. There's a field in sociology called mating intelligence, and that finds that as people get more experience, they figure out more of these steps. They're able to put together more if you give them, here are the steps of a dating script, talk, bond, flirt, go out together, one-on-one, kiss, have deep connection conversation. What order should these steps occur in? People with higher mating intelligence put them in the right order and they do it much faster because they start to figure out this process. And that's the same whether you're meeting her in your home country or in a foreign country. And it's not just humans that go through this. They find the same pattern with all these different kinds of animals. Like they'll find that female cats, for instance, are very shy around male cats when they're totally inexperienced. But by the time the female cats are doing a whole lot of mating, more so than humans. By the time female cats mated with like 20 different males, she just loves hooking up with
She's
new
got the
cats.
drill.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the same with like mice, rats, hamsters. The males have to typically they smell that a female is fertile by smelling her urine, pee. But when they're inexperienced, they can smell it and it doesn't have any effect on them because there's no connection in their brains yet that, okay, this scent means that she's ready for me to go knock her up. But after they have some sexual experience, they start smelling it and they're like, oh yeah, there's a sexy female hamster I can go mount right now. She's ready to go. So there's this whole process of learning the signs. And I have seen with guys who are totally inexperienced, I've been in countries where guys are getting laid pretty easily with their foreign guy game. But then I'll talk to guys that are inexperienced and they're like, oh, I don't know, the girls are so conservative here. And I haven't been able to get a girlfriend. And you talk to another guy and he's been with like tons of girls in that country. But there's so my general recommendation is do your best to figure it out at home and get your skills in place with the girls at home. And then once you start to travel, then it's like a bonus because it can be a lot easier or you'll have new experiences. And you also find that there's differences between getting together with girls in different places that takes some adapting to. The other thing I've seen with guys that were doing the passport pro thing is they'll get really good at getting the girls in whatever country they're in. And then they go back to their home country and they start complaining about like, oh, the women in my country are so entitled, so much easier over this other country because, one, they don't have the foreigner bonus, but the other one is a lot of times they've adapted themselves to a different group of girls that needs a somewhat different approach.
One thing you mentioned, I was thinking about the hamster, that even the hamster doesn't know what to do at first. And yet like our mating in society is quite a bit more complicated, I hope, than that of the hamster and the cat. But nobody's really taught the skills to like execute the proper steps anymore. Like guys just don't know what the hell to do at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you can watch, I found this video on YouTube from the 1950s and it was like how to get a date with a girl and how to behave on a date. And the guy's going through the same stuff that guys go through now. There's this girl that he likes and he's like nervous. He's like, what do I do? But his older brother comes along and he's like, dude, you got to go talk to her. Well, he didn't say dude because it's the 1950s, but whatever slang they were using back
then.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what you do. But he took him aside. He's like, you need to talk to her. You need to invite her to something, get her phone number. So he gets her number and he calls her on her house phone because they didn't have cell phones there. And he invited her to just some charity ball or something. It was popular in the 50s. And, the whole thing is like, he's got somebody there that can help him, that's giving him some guidance. And guys don't have that today, but it's less and less because we have this move into the cities and everyone's so atomized and isolated. People are on their screens all the time. People are socializing less and less. I mean, tons of studies on that. Just people are having less and less. Men in particular are having fewer and fewer friends. And with everyone split apart, there's just this breakdown in the transfer of knowledge. Guys that have it figured out aren't transferring it to guys that don't have it figured it out yet. And instead, there's just all these, like we talked about earlier, the low information quips that then get misinterpreted and misconstrued. And so with that breakdown of knowledge, I think in general, there are always some guys that are energetic and ambitious, and they're like, I'm going to figure this out myself. But most guys aren't like that. Most guys are just going to go along with whatever path is in front of them. If they don't have anything to help them and guide them, it can be really hard for them to figure this stuff out, especially in a complex mating market. If you go to, if you have a de-urbanized society, you have people in small communities, and there are like 3 different girls that you could maybe date that are eligible your age there, you're going to figure it out pretty quickly which one you're going to end up together with. And it's a pretty straight shot from there. And then you got the whole community that's helping you to get together, like, oh, she seems like a great girl for you. When are you going to get married? Who was pushing that to happen? In a big city, there's nobody that's pushing you to get together with anybody. There's so many different women out there. They're all strangers. You don't know anything about them. There's the girl you work with. Does she have a boyfriend? You're not really sure. I think maybe she had one before. What was the status now? But there's just this breakdown in information. And with the lower and lower information, you really need to have a much higher risk tolerance in general to be able to make it work in those environments. And most guys don't have that, especially with the drop in testosterone we're seeing. At the same time that everything gets way more complicated, men's testosterone, which is the thing that they need to deal with all the complexity and challenges, falling off a cliff. It's like everything just gets worse and worse.
The one thing you mentioned was very interesting is that you said there's some guys who will figure it out, but most guys won't. And I think it's really important for people to realize that you can't figure everything out. Like if you want advice on any particular thing, like some guy like you will be like, I'm going to figure out this one thing, but you're not also figuring out like, well, how do I become a YouTuber, or how do I build cars? Like like as a human, everything we do is built on experts, like real experts. I don't mean, the quote unquote experts, like people who really devoted their life to something. And then they could pass it along to us, just by talking to us, be like, oh, don't do this. I spent 5 years screwing up this, but look, it just like, here's like a 5-step thing. Now it'll take you like 6 months to figure it out. And yeah, like without that information transfer, like you just can't figure out everything about life. And this is about girls, but it's also about like, how do you do finances? How do you, where do you live? What do you do? How do you, like, basically everything. How do guys, like, what would you suggest to guys in terms of where to look for really good information? Like, how do you spot like the bullshit artists from people who actually want to help you and not just like sell you some nonsense that isn't going to help?
Well, that's the real challenge, because when you're not an expert, you don't have a good radar at all for what is quality advice and what isn't. And I've seen it plenty of times, so there's a certain amount of intuition. I know when I was new, I had enough of the social intuition that I'd built over years, and I'd also, from just having gone out for about a year or so talking to girls myself, I already had a fairly good intuition about, and the way that I found all these other guys was I had met this girl in a nightclub, and she was kind of not, she would be interested. She'd have all these long conversations with me, but when I try to move forward, she wouldn't go for it. So I was typing online. I was like, how do I kiss a girl in a nightclub? And I found all these different articles that were just mainstream stuff. And I was like, yeah, I know what that is. I've heard that advice before. It doesn't work. That's just wishy-washy stuff. And finally, I found this one guy named Swingcat who's still around, and his stuff was awesome. He's got like all this different stuff. And I was like, just from reading this, I know that it's going to work. And it's like stuff that I can go out and try. And like, how can you tell the difference between that? Because a lot of guys aren't good at that. But, as soon as you can, once you can tell the difference. But there's a sort of, in our community, is game recognizes game is the saying. But, I would say one thing is you got to look for actionable advice. People are saying, okay, go out, try this, do this. And then if you're just not sure, you can go out and try it yourself and see what happens. If that doesn't work, go out and try something else. Look for different ones, but it's difficult. One of the best recommendations is look for some kind of a community around it. Are there other people that are following this advice? Are they getting results with it? What kind of results are they getting? That's another indicator. And I would just say in general, like what you were saying earlier, the skills to become an expert at something and the skills to become good at marketing yourself in something are totally different. And it was one of the tragedies that, to me, that I saw from my involvement with the whole seduction community thing, was there would be guys that were just scarily good with this stuff. And they would have these amazing approaches to it that are like really, really good with girls. But, they didn't know how to market themselves. Maybe they'd try and write a book or something. Nobody would ever hear about it or find it. And eventually they'd be like, well, I can't make money here. I guess I got to go back to my old job. And they go back to doing whatever they're doing. And meanwhile, we're probably out there getting all kinds of stuff with girls going on. But guys that want to learn that are like going to these big marketers that have a much less good approach going for them. But the guy's really good at marketing. So he sucks in all the people. So for me, I was like, that's the tragedy. We've got the high skilled guys and we've got the great marketer guys, and there's usually very little overlap. So I was like, all right, I got to figure out this marketing thing so we could try and change that. And, I would say we've been successful to a certain extent, but there's also plenty of we haven't really figured out YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. We got 30,000 subscribers on there, but there are people that have millions of subscribers on YouTube, and how we crack that nut. I guess I could figure it out, but I'd have to sit down and game plan it and try and learn everything about YouTube. It'd be this whole other skill to build. Is it going to be worth it? I don't know. But the thing is, we can't reach people on YouTube because we don't have that skill. So you really have to look around. You got to do some digging, do your research, homework, and just do your best to work for communities, try stuff out, and just go with the mindset that until I get to a certain level, I'm probably not going to be good at telling who is really adept at this and who is not. Keep it open mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about the question after I asked you too, because what you're saying is true. In almost every field, like the people who are good at it are like never the people who are good at marketing. They're the people who are like, I'm going to get really good at this thing, and they just often don't want to market. They don't want to think about marketing. They think it's like somehow dishonorable, like it's beneath them. And yeah, those guys have like the deepest insights, and usually, in terms of good advice, it usually has a lot of nuance. And it's like, okay, this will work. It's like, this might work depending on this and this and this. Like you'll see when guys have a lot of experience, they'll have a lot of ideas of why things might happen, and they'll say, okay, this might happen, or this might happen, or this might not work at all, and they won't promise you. Yeah, it goes beyond the superficial. Whereas the bullshitters, like, sometimes I watch like these guys with like really big followings. And it's like, this guy has never struggled. Like he just says things because it worked for him. Like has he worked with like 500 guys, half of whom are total losers? Like, does he really know? Or is it like, well, I'm good looking and well raised. And it's always been easy. So just go talk to them. It's no problem. Be yourself. And like, be yourself is one of those things that's like really good. What you mean by be yourself is like, act as if you have no fear. But like, it's not something you can really execute easily. We were talking before we started about like the big change in 2014. I think it's something guys like who are a little bit younger, like they don't know what the universe was like before Tinder, right? Like what happened from your perspective, like as that became popular?
Well, when I got into the whole dating area, it was same as you. I'd read Neil Strauss's book, The Game, which was really big in 2005, 2006, and for a few years after. Guys are still reading it now, but it's there's more and more guys now that are like, oh, what is that? I never heard of that. Back then, it was really big. And for the guys that don't know, Neil Strauss was a journalist. He was a celebrity journalist. He'd interview, Britney Spears, just all the different, who's like Courtney Love, and all these different celebrities, and but he was this nerdy, nebbish kind of guy, and then he got involved in the pickup community, and he was like, "What happens here?" And then he did a makeover himself, and he started learning all these tricks of the trade from Mystery, who was the big guy at the time, and then he started getting all the success with girls, and he wrote about it in a book. And then it's got like the typical journey where like he gets all the success, and then he realizes that really it was bad all along, and finally he meets the girl it doesn't work on, and then he has to drop the act, and it gets the girl happily ever after. And then, what they don't have in the book was that she left him for a drummer or a rock band a few months later. But I mean, it's like a nice story, and it gets you really excited because it shows you all these different gurus in the space and all the different things that they're teaching. And it's this kind of crazy wild ride. So guys would find that. And what was happening at the time was everyone that you would talk to back in the late 2000s to a little bit after 2010, whenever you talk to guys about girls, they'd be like, what do I have to say? What do I have to say to get the girl? What are the words to say? Just tell me what to say. And at the time, I was fighting this a lot because I was looking at it, I was like, look, yeah, what you say is important, but you also have to take care of your fundamentals, which is what I was calling your posture, the way you hold your chin, your eye contact, the way that you move, the way that you talk, the way you use your voice, the way you interact with other people. All these passive attractive factors that really factor in. Because if you're saying the right words, but you've got this off-putting appearance, then it doesn't matter. Whereas when you have this well put together appearance and they're coming across very attractively, then you could be saying almost anything and girls will still be intrigued. So I was fighting this, but I'm still getting all these guys like, what do I just need to know the right words to say. And so all these guys were going out, and especially the guys that were having social difficulties, like some of the autistic guys or guys that were way behind on the curve, be going out and trying to repeat all these words, and it just wasn't working, and it started getting really frustrated. So more and more of these guys started drifting over to this site that was called PUA hate at the time, and then eventually it became incels and looks max. Now it's this huge look max forum, but it started out as like anti-pickup artist stuff, and that's where the whole incel community comes from. These are guys that sailed with pickup artistry because they couldn't get the words to work, and so then they became obsessed with looks, and they became incels. But at the same time, we also had these dating apps start emerging. So we had online dating before, but then these dating apps came. And first, the dating apps were actually really good. Nobody remembers what Tinder was originally. Tinder, so I don't, most people don't know this, but the guy that started Tinder, the way he started it was as a way to get past approach anxiety. Because he was sitting in a coffee shop, and he tells this story. He's sitting there, and he looks over, and he sees this beautiful girl, and he was like, oh man, I have to go talk to that girl. But as soon as he thought that, he started getting really, really nervous. He was like, well, what if I go talk to her and she doesn't want me to talk to her? Well, she blows me off. And then she turned and she looked at him and she smiled. And suddenly he was like, the fear just went away. And he knew that he could go talk to her. And he was like, what if there was a way that you could know that a girl wanted to talk to you before you wanted to go talk to her? What if you could just do it on the app? It's like, what if you just swiped on her, and if she swiped on you, then you go talk to her? And that's what original Tinder was. Original Tinder had this location thing, and you could just check to see what people were in your area. You swipe on them, and then they get a notification. They'd swipe on you. And then if you both matched, it'd be like, okay, 10 feet over right there. You go talk to them right there in person. It was an in-person meeting facilitator. But once Match Group got its claws in it, Match Group's like, okay, how do we, make as much money as possible? We don't want people meeting off the app and then getting into relationships. We got to keep them on the app. So they got rid of the location stuff. They made it this gamified thing where they're using the ELO algorithm, which was designed for chess, and it's really bad for matching people in person. But all these guys were ending up down below. But what happened was Tinder started really catching fire in 2014, and at the same time, the general seduction space started declining in interest. And you can see from Google Trends, you can look up all the search terms, how to get a girlfriend, how to get a date, how to text a girl, how to get laid. They all just started falling off a cliff. People stopped searching for this stuff. And at the same time, if you search for how to Tinder, it explodes. All this dating app stuff blew up at the same time that people were losing interest in dating any other way. And so we saw like a massive traffic drop at that time, and sales fell off. And a lot of people in our industry were just going crazy. They're like, oh, it's the end of the world. Or, a lot of people jumped out of the business. They're like, okay, I'm going to switch over into something else. They switched over into crypto or whatever else, especially the people that were marketers and not experts, because they're just going to go where the money is.
Yeah.
And on our site, what we started getting was, before, when I started running GirlsChase and started really getting serious with it from like 2011 to maybe like 2015, we would get negative comments, but it was mostly from women who were like feminists, who were like, what you're teaching guys is manipulation. It's like evil. This is, you don't need to this stuff anyway. You just have to go up and talk to women, and then it just works out. Like, I don't know, they're making this way overcomplicated. And we get like some religious guys who are like, I think this is wrong. We shouldn't be having sex before marriage. You're taking guys down the wrong path. We get some of that, but that was most of the hate that we got. But then that started all dropping off around 2015. It was replaced by more and more of these guys who were coming on saying, this doesn't work. It's too much work. The only thing that girls care about is looks. And it took me a few years to piece it together, because I'd have these guys come on and be like, where do they get this from? Like, nobody that I know, or like nobody that's on our forum. Like, I'm not seeing this. Like, I don't know anybody that is like, the only thing girls care about is look. You can just go out and talk to girls, meet some really hot girls, super good looking, and they're really into you if you're doing things right. I don't know what they're talking about. So I started asking these guys, like, hey, how many girls have you approached in the last 6 months? These guys that are saying, the only things girls care about is looks. And they'd be like, well, I like talk to one girl, but it's, mostly on dating apps. Like, I don't talk to them in person. And you're like, oh, that's what it is. Because what is it? Like, you open up a dating app, what do you see? Nothing but photographs. There's nothing but pictures. The only thing that she can evaluate you on are looks. Maybe there's like a little blurb about your occupation or something, but
nobody reads it.
It's 90% visual. And when you understand dating apps, there's 75 to 80% male populations on there. It's mostly men, and it's mostly not women, because most girls get on dating apps, and if you talk to women about it, they're like, I got on there, I get like flooded with guys. It was overwhelming. And I was like, yeah. And then I just uninstalled it. It's like the girls that are on there are like the really motivated girls. They tend to be high testosterone girls. They tend to be these higher partner girls. When they're high testosterone, higher partner, they also tend to be more visual. So they are going to be the girls that are rating guys more on looks. And the other thing is, when it's such a seller's market, such a buyer's market on there, you've got so many guys for so few girls. The girls can be a lot pickier with which guys they're going to pick. And if you look at just the sex ratios, it looks like a typical nightclub. You walk into the club, it's 70% guys, 30% girls. Walk on the dating app, 75% guys, 25% girls. So you think maybe it's about the same, but it's not the same, because you go to a nightclub and there are maybe like 6 to 10 guys that hit on her throughout the whole night. And especially most of those guys aren't even hitting on her until later on when they're drunk and they've got the liquid courage. Only a few guys are actually talking to her with any real skill set or game or ability to really get a conversation going. On the dating app, she's getting flooded with like hundreds of messages and matches from guys every day. It's just this volume of guys pouring down on top of her. So she's extra, extra, extra picky. And guys will get on these apps and they open them up, and the app isn't showing them all the other dudes that are competing for these girls. All they see are female profiles. So they're like, oh man, it's just me and all these women. I've got this abundance of options, because it tricks the brain. So they start swiping on all these women. They're like, I'm going to get matches for sure. There's so many girls here. I'm swiping on all of them. I'm going to get some matches. But they don't see that all the other guys are also swiping on all those girls. Each one of those girls is getting tons and tons of matches. So then they don't get anything and they get demoralized. And there are a bunch of studies now showing that when men get on dating apps, their self-esteem falls. When they start getting depressed, they start thinking that they're less attractive. And I have had some of our authors, so one of our authors, a guy named Alex Rolstad, who I and a bunch of other guys all agree is probably the best guy that we know of in field right now. He goes out to high-end nightclubs. He talks to beautiful women. He gets these girls to come back with him the same night and does it consistently. He'll typically be getting at least one girl per weekend. When he's running hot, he'll be getting 2 girls a weekend, sometimes more. This guy is really, really good. The coronavirus lockdowns hit. He was shut away into his apartment in Paris. He couldn't go outside. If you go outside, you get like a 300 or 400 euro fine. They kept it that way for 18 months. They just had one brief window where they opened up. And so he was like, there's nothing I can do. He had a couple of girls he was seeing at the start of it, and he was able to sneak them over because you could only leave to buy groceries or go to the doctor's. But there was a doctor's office in the lobby of his building. So you get girls to write these slips saying they'd go to the doctor's, and they would sneak up to his apartment. But eventually over time, if it's a casual relationship, it just drops off and the girls stop coming. So he was like, well, I'll finally try these dating apps. And he got on there and he's got some really cool pictures. He's a really stylish guy. He's got his look down really good. And he's got these high value looking pictures he got on there. He started swiping, and the only thing he could match with were fat girls and transsexuals. And he was like, I don't know. Did I lose my mojo? He's like, it's affecting me. I don't know what to do. And then they did the reopening thing where they briefly reopened for, I think it was 5 weeks. He went out immediately the first week. He brought a beautiful girl back home with him, and then he kept going on. And he realized, like, it's not me, it's these apps. Like, we also know guys that are really good at these apps. And I've got some guys that I've worked with who just clean up on dating apps. There is a method to them, but if you don't know what the method is, you will just get nothing on there unless you happen to be extremely good looking or have extremely good pictures. But it's either know it or just crickets. And guys get depressed because they're like, there's so many girls, none of these girls want me. The human brain's not wired to deal with this properly. And then the thing that happens on top of that is like, wow, it's so easy on the app because there's so many girls. I'm swiping all these girls. If none of these girls want me, it must be even harder in person because, there you have to go up, talk to a girl. I can't get the same volume. I can only talk to a few girls a day. It would be, there's no point in even trying because if you can't make it work on the app, how could it work in real life? So you get all these skewed perspectives set of them.
And none of these perspectives are conscious. You don't realize you're thinking this, but like you said, your brain just like sees this as reality, and that's what you internalize.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell people is like, it's not nice, but if you think you're an unattractive guy and you're like, well, ugly guys don't get laid. It's like, well, if you're here, somebody ugly got laid at some point, right? Like we're not all models.
Yeah.
Like we're not all models. It's not like women only sleep with Chad. Like otherwise we would all look like that, and we don't. So
exactly.
Somehow it happened, right? Like we're not all perfect.
Yeah. Some girl thought your dad looked great and he thought your mom looked great. 2 of them got together somehow.
And that was good enough, right? And that's still how it works probably in the majority of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Do you recommend that guys just like get off the apps? And then I have one more question and then I'll let you go before it gets too late there.
Yeah. I generally recommend, unless you're going to get serious about dating apps, if you can get serious about them and you're going to figure out what it takes to succeed on them, then you can do apps. But if you're just going to do it recreationally, we're just going to do a bunch of swiping, and especially if you're not getting matches and the matches you're getting aren't worthwhile, then yeah, get off the apps and force yourself to go out and meet girls in person, because we'll see a lot of guys using apps as a crutch. The guy's like, I should go out and meet girls right now, but I'll just hop on the app and do some swiping instead. And then he gets like one fat girl and he's like, well, that's the only option. I guess I got to get the fat girl to come on over. And then he's like, oh, well, I'm only getting fat girls.
And she doesn't show up anyway.
Yeah. She flakes on him. He's like, the fat girls don't want me. So
Yeah.
unless you're going to get serious about it, I suggest you get off the apps and learn to meet girls in person.
All right. One last question and then we'll call it. So what is like the internal change that guys go through or should go through, like as they get better? And I ask this because I realized that what really helped me get better with women was like, you learn how to do like outward things, but ultimately like what people really respond to is like your being. And it's very woo-woo, but like they respond to who you are, not at all what you say. If you're like the right kind of person and you're happy and you're energetic and you're positive and you're likable, you could go there with a freaking like bag on you and it'll probably be okay. Whereas if you say all the right things, it doesn't matter. So like what happened? Like, what is your take on that? Like, what do you see as guys like progressing as they go through this process?
Yeah, well, there's a number of different names for it. The easiest one is confidence, right? You ask girls what they like, every single girl, confidence. I like a confident man. The one we use in the more seduction space is frame. When you have your frame, and it's used in psychology too, although not used quite in the same ways a lot of the times. But your frame is just the way you see yourself, the way you see the world. Two guys can be identical in every other way, but if they have a totally different frame, women will react to them in totally different ways. If my clone walks up to a girl, but he thinks like, like women don't want me and I have to work really hard to try and get a girl. If I was better looking, then girls would like me more. She's just going to be repelled from that guy. Whereas if I walk up to a girl and have a good time, I was just talking to a cute girl over here. She saw me and that girl was into me. Like, I know she's going to be intrigued to at least find out a little bit more about me. And probably once she starts to find out more about me, she's going to get even more intrigued. So there's a certain expectation that you build over time. Like, I expect that women are going to react a certain way to me. And if they don't, well, that's their problem. You just get this more cavalier attitude towards it. But there's just a general progression of, guys starting out is really unsure. He's unconfident. He doesn't know what's going on. And over time, he starts to get more confident in more parts of the process. Like, okay, at least I know that I can probably talk to girls. You're not going to bite my head off. I know that maybe I can get some dates that might not go the way I want. And then over time, you just get more and more confident in different parts of the process. You get more confident in yourself as a man. You start to know what you can, what you will and won't put up with. That's kind of not even the right way to put it. But like, guys hear that and they're like, oh, I've got to have these rules. Like, I won't tolerate this. But it's more like, if she's doing this, then I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to deal with that. But you'll tease her or something. You'll let her know in some socially savvy way that that's not the right way to deal with you. And then because she's probably also socially savvy, she'll recognize it. She'll adjust. Just this whole understanding of the social process and how to get what you want from other people without having to, get angry and walk away or start, trying to force value. Like, oh, I'll just do whatever you want. Just please give me what I want. Not clingy, not angry, but you can just do things in a cool way because you see all the different routes to travel socially and you can navigate the social matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more or less what I experienced, what other guys know of experience. Like you become a much more emotionally well-developed person, because we'll do anything to get laid, essentially, even if it means a great amount of personal growth.
Sure.
All right, man. So if people want to work with you, where do they find you and how do they find you? Are you even available for people to work with?
I don't normally take coaching clients myself, but you can go to GirlsChase.com. We got tons of content going up all the time. We do have other coaches. If you go to GirlsChase.com/coaching, or maybe it's GirlsChase.com/coaching/phone, we got a page up there. But what I typically recommend for guys that are totally unfamiliar with us is to take our diagnostic quiz first. If you go to girlschase.com/quiz, that'll take you through a quick quiz that evaluates your girl queue, where you are with girls right now. And then based on how you score, it gives you a recommendation for what you should focus on. So we get you signed up to email, we send you a free book. Now we got beginners, journeyman, technician, depending on that. And then it'll guide you through our content because we got tons of content. It's easy for guys to get lost on there. So we give them a recommendation, start here, look at this, focus on that, and that'll help you get oriented. And then you're on the email and we'll send you more stuff. We got another free course that we send guys to sign up. And if they really want to work with me, they can talk to our support and we can talk about, rates and availability. But generally, we push them towards one of the other coaches who are a little bit more affordable. And we got some really great.
And the most important thing is that like how you deal with women can drastically change into ways you could never imagine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to buy that if you haven't seen it, but like the change can be like just fundamental. All right, Chase. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to come on the podcast, and perhaps we'll have another one at some point. And please make some more YouTubes for the viewers.
Yeah, it's another skill to learn. To give it a shot.
Skill to learn. All right, man.
Thanks,
Take
Alex.
care.
Cheers.
Cheers.